Chapter 5 Mandy's Plan. "But don't you see," Mandy said when she had finished telling Grandpa her idea, "I bet the old residents would love to have therapy cats. They would make them feel much better." "Sure, you're right, Mandy," Grandpa said. "The cats would be great company for the residents, but 6? Surely they wouldn't want the whole crowd." "There's 24 people there," Mandy insisted. "That's only a quarter of a cat each." Grandpa laughed. "I can see you've been practicing your math, Mandy Hope." "That doesn't take much working out," Mandy said. "Why don't you ask Della?" Grandpa suggested. "There's no harm in asking. You know what your grandma always says. If you don't ask, you don't receive." Mandy jumped to her feet. "I'll call her right now." Grandpa got up too. "Not now, young lady. It's your bedtime. You'll have to do it tomorrow." "But, Grandpa..." Grandpa shook his head. "Sorry, Mandy. It's a rule. Early to bed on school nights. One day won't make any difference. You'll get me shot if your mom comes home and you're still up and talking on the phone." Mandy sighed. "Okay, Grandpa. I'll call tomorrow." Upstairs, Mandy sat in bed. She tried to start writing in her journal, but she only got as far as putting day 1. She couldn't concentrate at all. Her mind kept wandering back to the kittens. She kept seeing them in that tattered old cardboard box. She kept smelling that musty old shed. What if Della didn't think therapy cats were a good idea after all? There were only 2 days left. What else could she start looking? The next day, Mandy couldn't wait for school to be over. She had told her mom and dad about her plan at the breakfast table. Dr. Emily had looked doubtful. "How will they cope with 6 kittens?" she said. "Grown-up cats are a different thing altogether, but 6 kittens could cause problems." "There's a big garden," Mandy said. "They could play out there." "Well," Dr. Emily said, "you better wait and see what Della says before you get your hopes up. But Mandy," she gazed at her daughter's excited face, "don't be too disappointed if she says no." "I won't," Mandy said, although she knew she would be. When it was time to go, James was waiting for Mandy by the front gate. She told him her plan as they rode their bicycles to school. "That would be great," he said. "We could put your pocket money together and buy them each a dish." Mandy had been making up plans in her head ever since she woke up. "And I'm sure Grandpa will make them a big box if we ask him nicely." "I'm sure my mom could find them an old blanket," James said. "One that Blackie hasn't chewed." "My mom says they might not be able to cope with all 6, Mandy said. "But I would like the family to stay together if they can, wouldn't you?" "Yes." James looked thoughtful. "We could help take care of them. We could go there after school and feed them, things like that. Your mom could tell us what to do." "I know how to look after kittens," Mandy said. "They need a warm bed and food, and they need to be groomed every day. They need toys and..." "We solved the problem," said James. Mandy looked at him. "Della did say we could go and visit any time we liked, James. You're so smart." Katie was walking along the pavement as they arrived at school. "Did anyone call about the cats?" Mandy asked anxiously. Katie shook her head sadly. "No. Have you found anybody?" Mandy glanced at James. It would be better not to say anything until she had asked Della. "No," Mandy said, "but my grandma's going to ask around, and my mom and dad." "And my mom and dad," James added. In class, Mrs. Todd had to remind Mandy several times that gazing out the window would not help her learn math. "What's the matter with you, Mandy?" she asked when class was over. "You're not yourself today." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Todd," Mandy said. "I've got a lot on my mind." "Yes, well, make sure it's schoolwork that's on your mind tomorrow," Mrs. Todd said. "Otherwise, you're going to get behind. We don't want that, do we?" "No, Mrs. Todd." Mandy hung her head. She knew it would be hard to set her mind to anything until she found a place for the kittens. She just couldn't wait to get home and call Westmore House. Katie caught up with Mandy just as she was leaving. "No one wants the kittens," she said. Mandy could see she was almost crying. "I've asked everybody." A tear ran down Katie's cheek. "And my dad says he's going to get rid of them." "Get rid of them?" Mandy asked in horror. "What does that mean?" Katie shrugged. "I don't know. He just said if they're not gone by Saturday morning, he'll get rid of them." Mandy put her arm around Katie's shoulders. "Don't cry, Katie," she said. "James and I have got a plan." "What kind of plan?" Katie asked. "I can't tell you yet," Mandy told her, "but I promise I'll let you know about it as soon as I can." "We need to do something soon." Katie wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Or it's going to be too late." She began to cry even harder. "It's bad enough having to leave all of my friends," she sobbed, "but leaving the kittens too." Mandy took a tissue from her bag. She gave it to Katie. The little girl blew her nose loudly. "I'd better get home or my mom will wonder where I am." "Try not to worry," Mandy said as they went to get their bikes. Katie sniffed again. "I'll try, and thank you for helping me so far." She looked sad as she rode off in the direction of the church. Mandy felt very anxious as she rode home with James. It was all right telling Katie not to worry, but how was she going to stop worrying herself? "Can't stop," Mandy said as they arrived at James's gate. "I want to call Della as soon as I can." "Good luck," James said. "I'll let you know what she says," Mandy called as she rushed off. "Keep your fingers crossed." "I will," James shouted. Mandy skidded to a halt outside her gate and flung it open. She propped her bike up against the wall and hurried in through the waiting room door of Animal Ark. Mrs. McFarlane from the general store was sitting on one of the chairs. She had a cage on her lap. Inside it was a green bird with all its feathers fluffed up. It looked very upset about something. "Oh dear!" Mandy stopped in her tracks. She sat down next to Mrs. McFarlane and peered at the bird. "What's wrong with Sparky?" She put her finger through the bars. Sparky ignored it. "I don't know," said Mrs. McFarlane. "She's been like this for a couple of days." "Maybe he's lonely," Mandy suggested. "Perhaps he would like a friend?" Mandy almost suggested a kitten, then decided that wasn't a good idea. Birds and kittens definitely did not mix. Mrs. McFarlane sighed. "A friend?" "Yeah," Mandy said. "Birds live in flocks in the wild. Most people only have one, but birds do like having a friend." "You could be right," Mrs. McFarlane said. "I'll see what your mom says, Mandy. He's been quite content with talking to himself in his mirror up until now." Mandy stood up. "You don't know anyone who wants a kitten, do you?" "I've already asked," Jean Knox said, as she came in from the back room. "I'm sorry, Mandy, I don't," Mrs. McFarlane said. "I don't think poor Sparky would take kindly to a kitten." "No," Mandy said. "Neither do I." "I'll ask my customers if you like," Mrs. McFarlane offered. "Most people come in at some time or another." "It's got to be soon," Mandy said. "I'll do my best," Mrs. McFarlane promised. "Has anyone else seen my ad?" Mandy asked Jean. "One or two people," Jean said. "That's all, I'm afraid." "Not to worry," Mandy said. "If I'm lucky, I might find a home for them all this evening." "Oh?" Jean raised her eyebrows. "All of them?" "Yes," Mandy said with a grin. "The whole litter." Mandy dashed on through into the house. She dumped her bag in the hall and quickly looked up the number of Westmore House. She dialed the numbers and tapped her fingers on the table. "Please hurry," she muttered under her breath. "Please." But when someone did answer, it wasn't Della. "I'm afraid she's out," the voice said. "Oh." Mandy's heart sank. Every moment was precious. Every passing hour took the kittens closer and closer to being gotten rid of. "When will she be back?" Mandy asked anxiously. "About 7, I think," the voice told her. "Can I give her a message?" Mandy thought it would be much better to tell Della herself. "No," she said quickly. "I'll try later. Thank you." Mandy put down the phone with a sigh. She looked at the clock on the wall. 2.5 hours! How was she going to be able to wait that long? Mandy was sitting at the kitchen table writing in her journal when Dr. Emily came in from the clinic. Mandy looked up. "Did you find out what was wrong with Sparky?" she asked. "He just needed a little rest," Dr. Emily said. "And you'll be pleased to know Mrs. McFarlane is going to get him a friend." Mandy smiled. "That's great, Mom." Dr. Emily went to put the kettle on. "Did you have a good day at school, Mandy?" "No, terrible," Mandy said. "Been thinking about Katie's kittens all day." "Have you called Westmore House?" her mom asked. Mandy nodded and told her what had happened. Dr. Emily came up with a solution. I know, she said. I've got to deliver some antibiotics to Sky Farm later. Why don't we stop at Westmore House on the way? Mandy jumped up and gave her mom a hug. It would be much better to ask about the kittens in person. Oh, Mom, that would be great. Can James come? She knew James would hate to be left out. If his mom says it's okay, Dr. Emily said. Call and ask if you'd like. James did want to come. He was waiting by the gate when Dr. Emily drove up in the car. She opened the door. Hop in, she said. Thanks. James climbed into the back seat. I can't wait to see Della, Mandy told him excitedly. Mom thinks therapy cats are a great idea, don't you, Mom? Dr. Emily nodded. Yes, but it's Della you've got to convince, not me. They arrived at the home just as Della pulled up in her car. She smiled when she saw Mandy. Not more cakes, she said, her blue eyes twinkling. No, Mandy laughed. We've come to ask you a favor. Oh? Della said. Mandy quickly introduced her mom, then started to explain what they had come for. All her words seemed to come out too quickly. And you see, we thought the residents would love them, didn't we, James? She blurted out. Yes, James said, looking up at Della. Della held up her hand. I think you'd better come inside and start all over again, she said. When they got inside, Della took Dr. Emily, Mandy, and James into her office. Do sit down, she said. Now, Mandy, your friend Katie has got 6 unwanted kittens, right? Now continue. Mandy finished the story. And Katie's dad is going to get rid of them, she said desperately. Tomorrow. Della looked thoughtful. 6 cats. She shook her head slowly. Mandy, it's an awful lot. Maybe you could just take 2, James said. Or 3, or... But we would really like them all to stay together, Mandy said quickly. Wouldn't we, James? Yes, James agreed. Della sat with her hands clasped together. It would be horrible for them to be split up, Mandy went on. You said some of the people in here were sad because they didn't have families. I know they would understand how the kittens feel. Della got up out of her chair. Yes, you're right, Mandy. Well, let's go and ask some of the residents. Let's see what they think about having some kitten friends.